Well, hello again, everyone. This time the question has been posed to me is, how do you create a second level or an upper level? Now, to me, the definition of that is like having a totally independent track plan that is above the main level of the main part of your layout. But there are basically kind of like from the many videos that I've seen on YouTube, there's like two different types of upper levels or second levels. And the first one is what I'm going to be doing right now is creating that. And that's going to be like having like plywood that's raised up with all the track on it. So you've got surface area of plywood up there that you could add some buildings, some other scenery, etc., etc. The other term of an upper level or an elevated level or second level, however you want to call it, is where basically you just have strips of plywood that have been cut that the track just barely fits on, and you got a whole bunch of posts that are sticking up, so it's like an elevated, like an L type deal like you see in New York City, that the whole thing is completely elevated like that with just a single strips of plywood all the way around with no place to put buildings and scenery for the upper level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in two videos. I'm going to do this video here where I'm going to show the plywood method, the full plywood method. And then once I have that done, I will take that plan at that point and we're going to modify it, and I will show you how to be able to create a bridge type elevated section of track, okay, for a second level. So this here is, let's get into it. Here what you see on the screen is just a track plan that I simply threw together, just threw some track down here, threw some switches in there, and this is what I come up with, okay? Just as an example of, let's say this is your track plan that you're going to have for your main level of your layout, okay? Now, we don't have a base. If I go to my 3D view, you can see that it looks like my track is just floating in midair. So we need to add a base to this, or our table, so to speak. So we're going to go to our terrain view. And in our terrain view, I like to take and start with the largest size snap I feel I can get away with. So for right now, I know I can get away with 6 inches. So I'm going to set my snap at 6 inches. Then I'm going to move over to the other menu here where what type of a base do I want to create? And I'm going to select a rectangle because that's all we need right now is just a simple rectangle. I'm now going to move up here to where the intersection of this grid line is, hold down my left mouse button, and I'm going to drag this over. Now you can see that this is being jittery right here. Well, that's because of the snap. It's snapping over every 6 inches, which means it allows me that once I get down to this final corner and I let go of that, I've now aligned my base absolutely perfect to my grid lines. All right. So let's look at our 3D view. We now see our nice green table here and our track sitting on top of it. Everything's looking good. So now we're ready to create our upper or second level, however you want to call it. So let's go back to our plan view. Now this track has all been laid out on here on my default layer. I like using the default layer as my construction zone, shall we say, because then I always know where I'm working at is on the default layer. Once I have such as in this case, I've got the main level of this track plan is completed, I'm going to move it to a separate level, or a separate layer rather, I'm sorry. So let's go up to our options menu and we're going to select layers. Now if you look at your layers list, it's going to be different from mine because I mess around with mine. I've got all of these layers that are in here that I don't need. But I've got this one that I created called main level. But first, let's get rid of, because I hate clutter. I'm just going to take and highlight the layers that I don't want, and then come over here and click on remove, and just remove these other layers that I don't need. So now I'm left with my default layer and a layer that I have created called main level. Okay, so I've got that much cleaned up. So I'm going to say OK to accept all of that. But now I need to select all of this track. Now you can take in several ways. You can take and create a selection box around it like that. Or I can move my mouse over one section of track and double click on it, and any track that's connected to it is all going to get highlighted. Or I can come up to the edit menu, come down to where it says select all in layer. I want to select all the stuff that's in the default layer, say OK, which highlights it. Once I have it all highlighted, I can then go to my action menu, come down to move to layer, and I want to move it to the layer called main level, and click OK. Now you'll notice that you cannot select any of this track. That's because down at the bottom of the screen, you're in the default layer, but the track is set on main level. This keeps you from accidentally selecting anything that's on this layer. But now we have a slight little problem here. When you go to create the upper level track plan, it's going to be right on top of all of this, and things could get a little confusing when you're trying to determine which track is on the upper level and which one's on the main level and blah, 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 blah. So what I like to do is I like to come down here to my layer menu, and I'm going to move my mouse over the main level. I'm going to right click on it and then select hidden. It's like, let's just hide it out of view. It's not gone. It hasn't been deleted. It's still there. It's just being hidden for right now so that we have some better clarity. All right. Well, now we want to take and create the track that we want to lay out for our upper level. So at the moment, I'm using the Lionel O-Gauge track library. So that's for our tubular track. Okay. So I'm going to start off by laying out a 10-inch. Oh, this thing's going to give me a headache today, huh? So my track, my straight track, and it's like, there's my straight track. Let me get back to where I belong here. There we go. And now I'm just going to start adding some, let's say, some 031 curves in here. Okay, I'm going to create a little bit of a loop here. And I'm going to basically create what looks like I'm almost going to be forming a reverse loop, which I could do, because I'm going to have some straight track coming all the way over, and I'm going to repeat what I'm creating on the left side here is going to be also created on the right hand side. So for right now, I'm going to select all of that track, and I'm going to say duplicate it. Now I'm going to move this straight track over here, but now I want all of this track. I want to highlight all of my curves so that I can take and put this up here. And the reason I've got my snap is set at 1 is because I want this straight track that's going to go across the back side here to be exactly 4 inches from the edge of the layout. So if this is the edge of my layout across here, this is why it's helpful to have the base from that we did in the terrain view is set right on a grid line or on some equal mark that you know exactly where it's at. Because then when you place your track on there, you'll know exactly where you're positioning it in relationship to the edge of the layout. Now I can simply connect that all together. Again, this thing's going to give me a headache today for some reason. It's not cooperating for me and not allowing me to do what I want to do. So I'm going to have to take and do things the hard way here. And I'm just going to add a bunch of straight tracks in here. I'm kind of do it this way here so I can add a little bit more in there. And I think I can fit 2 more sections of track in there, maybe 3. Nope, just 2. Short little stubby section there. Say cut straight. Say bang, there it is. Now I'm also going to take 2 of those straight sections and I'm going to add it to here. Alright. I'm also going to take 5 of these straight sections and I'm going to move them down here. And because I've got my snap set at 1 inch, I want the center to center spacing here to be 4 inches. And because I've got the snap set, I can very easily do that, and I know exactly that these tracks are 4 inches apart. So now I need a curve track to go in here. Now you can see that they don't line up, but now if you saw my other video on how to align up the tracks for a reverse loop, we can use that same procedure here to get this curve track to line up with this straight track. So at first I'm going to measure it, and I've got 2.08 inches. So I'm going to select my cut straight, come down here, grab my menu. I'm going to enter in my 2.08 and then click on divided. Because our angle is at 45 degrees, I'm going to enter 45 and I want the sine of that angle. Then click on equals and I come up with 2.941. So now I can come over here to my thing there and enter in 2.941. Say OK. There's the track section. I can now move my curve section down here to connect to it, so I can double click on it to move them both together. Now I've got it added in between there. Now I want to verify to make sure that it lined everything up correctly. And you can notice in our upper right hand corner here, our vertical dimension is showing absolute perfect 0. So I'm done with that. Now I can double click on this to highlight all of those, move them over to connect it to this curve section. Now because the right hand side is going to be exactly the same as what's on the left hand side, I can take advantage of this situation. I could just put another curve in here, go through the process of doing the measuring again and so on, but there's a much easier way. I'm going to take and highlight those straight sections, say duplicate them, and move them over here. I'm going to duplicate that curves track, put it over here. Now I want to verify that those endpoints are lined up. I've got a perfect alignment there because my vertical says that it's absolute 0. Now all I have to do is say stock track and my connection is there. I'm done. So now if we look at our 3D view, we can see there's our upper level track, but it's down on the same height as the main table. We don't want that. So let's go back to our plan view again. And let's double click on any one of those tracks together so we can highlight that entire thing. And then we're going to go up to our action menu. And we're going to then select change height. And I'm going to take and change this height to 12 inches. And then click on set height. So now if I go back to my 3D view, you can see I've elevated the track to the 12 inches, but I've got all this terrain that's underneath the track. I don't want that. Well, we can easily take care of that by going back to the plan view, highlight all of that track by double-clicking on one of the sections, then with the mouse over one of those sections, right-click on it, come down to where it says Toggle Overpass, and select that. Okay? Now when you go back to your 3D view, you can see that the track is all elevated and there's no terrain connecting the upper level to the lower level. That's perfect. That's just what I want. But now I need some plywood underneath there. Okay? So let's go back to our plan view. And before we put the plywood in, there's one other thing we need to do. We need to come up to, I want to get this track off of my default layer. Okay? So I'm going to go up to my options menu, select layers, and I'm going to say add, which now is asking me to give this new layer a name. And I'm going to call it upper level and say OK. Click on OK again to exit out of there. Now I can double click on all of that to highlight it. Go up to my action menu, select move to layer, then select upper level, click on OK, and we're done. Now I can't select it unless I change the layer down at the bottom of the screen. So this is where things are going to come in handy, because now I'm going to take and create the plywood for this upper level. All right. I'm not worried about the bottom level, the main level right now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make my life a little easier. I'm going to take and set my snap now to, I believe, 6 inches will probably work for us. We might need to change that later, but we'll find out. I'm going to come up here to my Objects menu, select Basic Shapes, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to select Filled Polygon. Now, a filled polygon, I can take and move over here to this upper left-hand corner, drop a point there. I can add as many points as I want. So I'm going to then come down to there, and then let's see, let's go to here, I guess, and then we'll come up to there, and we'll come to here, we'll come down to there, come to there, and then this would be my last point. So my last point, I'm going to double click to form the polygon. Well, we got the polygon formed, but now I can't see the track anymore. But let's see what things look like in the 3D view. Well, there's my track, and it's still elevated at 12 inches. I can barely see the green part of my plywood down here, but that's only because it's like super thin. It doesn't have any thickness. So let's fix that. Let's go back to our plan view. We're going to left click on the plywood that we created. We're going to go up to our action menu and then select Extrude. Now, yeah, you're probably going to use maybe some 3/4 inch plywood. You could enter in 3/4 of an inch up here, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to make it 1 inch. Okay, so I'm going to extrude that 1 inch. Okay, now that I'm done, let's go look at it again in our 3D view. And now you can see that our green area is now got some thickness to it. Okay, so that's going to help us out. But now the thing with it is now we now know that the bottom of this plywood area is what's flush to the table. The top of this plywood area is 1 inch above that, but our track is 12 inches above. So we only got to elevate the plywood by 11 inches. So we're going to go back to our plan view, highlight the plywood, go up to our action menu. So we're going to select change height, and I'm going to enter in 11 inches. And I'm going to say set height. Now if I go to the 3D view, you can see I've got the plywood is elevated to the proper height, and then my elevated track is sitting right on top of it. All right, but in my plan view, I can't see the track. I want to see the track. So the best way to do this is we know that that upper level track is on a layer called upper level. So we can go up here to our edit menu and come down and say select all in layer, then select upper level, then select OK. Well, now you can see it, and all that track is just highlighted yet. It hasn't done anything really to it other than highlighting. Now we're going to go back up to our, I believe it is the action menu. And we're going to come down here and we're going to select move to front. Now the track is no longer highlighted, and now you can see the track. And again, when you go to your 3D view, everything is exactly like how you want the upper level to be. So back to our plan view. Let's bring our main level track back into view. All we have to do is come down here to the bottom of the screen to our layer menu, and you'll notice that the layer that's called main level has been kind of shaded out. It's kind of grayed out down there. Just left click on it. Now it puts you in that layer, so you're on the main level layer right now. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can now see our main level track. We can go up to our 3D view, and voila! There's our main level track in place and our table down there. Here's our upper plywood with all of our track that's up here. And we're all set. There's your second level, and there's how to create a second level. So I'm going to go back to our plan view again. And that's going to be it for this portion. What I'm going to do on the next video, the part B, so to speak, or part 2, however you might want to call it, I'm going to use this plan as it is. We're going to modify it by simply making a connection from here straight on across over to here, and we're going to make that like a bridge across there, where it will be just like a strip of plywood going across there with our track on top of it. Okay, that'll be in the next one. I hope this has been very helpful and answers anybody's questions that they may have, and we'll see you next time.